All right, today we are diving deep into a really critical turning point in India's struggle for independence, the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. If you're preparing for competitive exams, you absolutely know this agreement is a big deal. But what was it really all about? Was it a step forward or just a compromise? Let's get right into the details. So, here's our game plan. First, we'll set the scene with the incredible civil disobedience movement. Then, we're going to pull up a chair at that tense negotiating table, look closely at the compromise that was made, and then analyze what each side really gained and lost. And finally, we'll explore why this pact from way back in 1931 is still so important today. Okay, so what in the world led to this historic moment? To really get the pact, we have to rewind a little bit to the event that basically forced the British government to the table, the massive nationwide civil disobedience movement. Just look at how fast everything happened in 1930. The civil disobedience movement gets going, and then bam, the spark. Gandhi's 240 miles salt march ignites this absolute firestorm of protests and boycotts all across the nation. The British administration, they just couldn't control it. They resorted to mass arrests, and eventually they even put Gandhi himself behind bars. The pressure was just immense. So, with the country in total turmoil and the government really struggling to keep a lid on things, something had to give. Both sides knew they needed a truce, a way to cool things down, and this is what set the stage for the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, this landmark political agreement between Mahatma Gandhi, the face of the Indian National Congress, and Lord Irwin, the Viceroy of India. So, what did each side actually want when they sat down at that table? I mean, their starting points were worlds apart. And understanding their conflicting demands is really the key to unlocking why the final pact was such a complex and, controversial compromise. The stakes just could not have been higher. You can see the clash right here, plain as day. The Indian National Congress, with Gandhi leading the charge, came in with huge demands. Release all political prisoners, scrap the repressive laws, let Indians make their own salt. But for the British government, the goal was way simpler. Just stop the protests, get things back to normal, and get the Congress to show up for the Round Table Conference in London. Two totally different visions for the future. With such a huge gap between their goals, there was no way either side was going to get everything they wanted. The only path forward was through talking and, you guessed it, compromise. And that is exactly what led to the pact signed on March 5th, 1931. Make a mental note of this date because it is a crucial one, especially for your exams. This is the day that historic agreement was officially signed. This quote right here really nails the whole spirit of the pact. It wasn't a surrender, and it wasn't a total win for either side. It was a classic give and take. Gandhi agreed to call off the civil disobedience movement, and in return, the British gave up some important concessions. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty, the fine print. To really get a handle on this pact, we've got to look at what was accepted, what was rejected, and what was, somewhere in between. This is where the real story is, in all these details. So you can see just how nuanced this thing was. Let's take the release of prisoners. It was only a partial yes. Sure, most were freed, but, and this is a big one, not those convicted of violence. The right to make salt? That felt like a win, but it came with a huge catch. It was only for personal use. And that awful salt tax? It was staying. Confiscated property? Same deal, only a partial restoration. And the really big one? Formally recognizing the Congress as the sole voice of India, that was a hard no from the British. So let's be super clear. These were the major things the Indian National Congress just couldn't get. That salt tax, the very thing that kicked off the march, it wasn't abolished. Activists didn't get all their property back. And the ultimate goal of self-governance, that was kicked down the road for future discussions. It was a compromise in every single sense of the word. And for a lot of people, it really felt like an incomplete victory. So what about the pact's lasting legacy? This is a huge topic for exam essays, so let's really dig into why this compromise was so much more than just a temporary ceasefire. We can really see the pact's impact in three key steps. First, a massive shift in policy. For the very first time, the British Empire was sitting down and negotiating with an Indian leader as an equal. That was just unheard of. Second, it was a huge validation for the whole strategy of nonviolent resistance. Satyagraha had actually worked. It forced the empire to the table. And third, it laid the groundwork for all future negotiations, starting with that second round table conference. But the pact's real power wasn't just happening in government buildings. Just imagine being an average Indian person at that time, seeing Gandhi, one of your own, sitting across from the viceroy, negotiating as an equal. That was an incredibly powerful moment. It sent this wave of hope and strength across the entire country.
This chart does a great job of putting the pact's legacy into perspective. In terms of symbolic victories, the impact was huge. But for immediate, actual changes to how the country was run, the impact was pretty low. Its real value, as you can see, was in paving the way for all the talks that would come later.
But we have to look at the other side of the coin, right? At what the pact didn't do. It had some serious limitations. It didn't deliver on that ultimate goal of Purna Swaraj, or complete independence. It didn't fix the core economic problems. If anything, it was a pretty stark reminder of just how long and how difficult the road ahead was still going to be. Which brings us to the final critical question. Was the Gandhi-Irwin Pact a strategic masterstroke that proved the power of nonviolence once and for all? Or was it a flawed compromise that basically gave away the momentum of a national movement for way too few concessions? The answer, as you can see, is not simple at all. But now you have the context and the details to build your own argument. So what do you think?